My name's Ian McGilchirst. I'm a former consultant psychiatrist at the Bethlehem Royal and Maudsley Hospital in London. A change of heart. We focus on practical issues and expect practical solutions, but I think nothing less than a change of the way we conceive what a human being is, what the planet Earth is, and how we relate to that planet is going to help us. It's no good putting in place a few actions that might be a fix for the time being. We need to have a completely, radically different view of what we're doing here. Well, I wrote about it in a book called The Master and His Emissary. It's about the way in which we've got locked into a materialist and reductionist way of thinking, which appears to be realistic, truthful, logical, and it's actually none of these things. It's not logical, it's not well evidenced, it's actually not very sophisticated, and it's untrue by measure with anything else that we know, either from physics or from personal experience at the other end of the spectrum. It accounts for problems with education, with our attitudes to the environment, with the way in which our health services are deteriorating, the financial crisis. I think these things have various threads in common, which is to do with a loss of the realization that actually nothing exists atomistically distinct and separate from anything else, that systems are not linear but complex and reverberative, that you can't affect one thing without affecting many others, that things are not as predictable as they look, that you can't be, there is no such thing as an objective view of anything, there is always a take, it just depends what values you happen to be prioritizing. And we've lost a sense of the overall context of where we're going, what we think it means to lead a good life, to be a human being. We may be able to live for longer, we may be able to conquer diseases, we might even be able to pull ourselves out of the global catastrophe of environmental destruction. We may have left that too late. We may never be able to pull ourselves out of it, but even if we could pull ourselves out of it, it wouldn't really help us, because the question is, what are we doing here? What are our goals in life? What are our values? And at the moment they seem to be terribly reduced to greed, gain, and essentially the bottom line as an accountant would look at it. That governs practically everything in our lives nowadays. And people cover this up. They find all sorts of fancy and apparently altruistic things that they claim they're doing, but really at the bottom people are not interested in anything other than self in our society, with a few notable exceptions. Conferences like this are always structured on optimism and, you know, opportunities and so on, and I suppose I have to fit in with the rhetoric, but frankly I think it's nonsense. I mean, we're stuffed, and we might be able to pull ourselves out of it if we're able to notice how close we are to catastrophe, but I don't think we're equipped to do so. We see the narrow view, the short term. We don't learn from, we're disconnected from the lessons the past could have told us. We don't care about the future anymore, and we live for the here and now in a way which is really not tenable. I think it could. I mean, I noticed that an awful lot of the delegates are from areas that I would be fascinated to know what they really do, like strategy and leadership and motivation and so on, which seem to me rhetorical, basically. Creativity is not something you can drum up. Creativity is not something you can have a plan for. Creativity is not something we can have an algorithm to produce. Creativity is about leaving people alone, educating to the highest possible standards so that they know about other ways of looking at the world than the one that's given them by their own civilization. That means knowing a lot about history, learning from history, knowing about other cultures, thinking broadly, thinking in a way that's not the usual thing for the society. But I'm afraid that often when people talk about creativity, they have very tramlined ideas about what it means. And so you can feel dragooned into being creative in some way which isn't really creative at all. You can't plan for creativity. You can plan to make it impossible to be creative, but what we need to do is get out of the way. There's too many theorists getting in the way of allowing people to be creative. So there's a problem with having a conference. It's mainly, in my view, a way of alluding to the dangers and the possibilities. The dangers and the possibilities that are negative. And I hope that something fruitful can come out of it. I hope that people will begin to see things differently, and I can't see any harm in getting people together to discuss it.